My name is Teresa Hale, and the day my world broke open, I drove to my grandmother's house with a folder of repair receipts sitting on the passenger seat beside me. I had been keeping those receipts for years, every plumber's bill, every tax notice, every emergency fix, because something deep inside me always knew they would matter one day. I just never imagined the day would come so fast and feel so ugly. When I turned onto Evelyn Street, I saw the moving van first. It was parked at the curb like it belonged there, like it had every right to be swallowing up pieces of a life I had helped protect. Then I noticed the photographer near the flower beds, snapping angles, making the house look like a product. And then I saw the man on the lawn, clipboard in hand, walking slowly like he owned the morning. I parked, stepped out, and before I could even close my car door properly, my sister Bianca came walking down the porch steps. She looked me dead in the eye, and without a single second of hesitation, she told me to stay away from her house. Her house. Those two words landed like a slap. I was still trying to catch my breath when the man with the clipboard, the real estate agent, whose name I would soon learn was Adrian, frowned at his file and looked between us both. Then he asked the question that changed everything. Adrian looked confused in the way that people do when the facts in front of them do not match the story they were told. He flipped a page in his folder, ran his finger down a line, and then looked up at me and asked, "Wait, aren't you the one who still has to sign before we can proceed?" For one full second, nobody moved. The photographer stopped clicking. The movers paused by the van. Even the wind seemed to hold still. Then Bianca laughed, this short, bright, practiced laugh, and waved her hand like Adrian had said something silly. She told him not to worry, that there had been some mix-up, that everything was already handled. A second later, my mother, Celeste, appeared in the doorway of Evelyn's house. She looked at me the way she always did when she wanted me to disappear, calm on the surface, cold underneath. Celeste said the paperwork had already been taken care of and that I had no right to interfere with what was happening. Standing on that lawn, in front of a moving van and a camera and a man with a clipboard, I felt something I had never quite felt before. I felt like I was being erased. Not argued with. Not pushed aside. Erased, like I was a name someone had quietly crossed out of a document and hoped no one would notice. I left. I got back in my car and drove away because I knew that if I stayed one more minute, I would say things that could not be unsaid. But the whole drive home, one question would not leave me alone. Why were Bianca and Celeste so desperate to push me out so fast? That question sat in my chest the entire drive home and followed me through the door of my apartment and all the way to the kitchen table, where I finally sat down and let myself think. Evelyn's house had never been just a building to me. It was the place where I learned to cook. It was the kitchen where Evelyn taught me that a person who shows up is worth 10 people who promise to show up. It was the yard where she used to sit in her folding chair and tell me that hard work was not a burden, it was a signature. The house meant something. And I had been the one keeping it standing. While Bianca took pretty photos for her social media and talked about how devoted she was to Evelyn, I was the one scheduling the plumber. I was the one driving across town with groceries when Evelyn was too tired to leave. I was the one who found the mold growing in the back wall and paid to have it treated before it spread. I did those things not because anyone asked me to. I did them because Evelyn mattered to me and her home was an extension of her. That night, I spread every receipt across the kitchen table and counted 6 years of quiet, steady proof. 6 years of being the person who showed up. Then, almost by accident, I found an old voicemail on my phone, one I had saved and never deleted. Evelyn's voice came through the speaker tired but steady. She thanked me, used my full name, Teresa Hale, for keeping the house alive through the years when things got hard. Then she said something I had always remembered but never fully understood until that moment. She said, "Do not let anyone push you out of what is yours." I sat at that table and listened to her voice 4 times. Then 5. Then I lost count. My hands were shaking by the time I picked up my phone and forwarded the recording to Nina, a lawyer friend I trusted more than most people I had ever met. I added a short message asking if the voicemail meant anything legally. I expected a text back. Maybe a quick opinion, something casual. Nina did not text. She called. And the first thing she asked me, her voice careful and direct, was whether I had ever actually seen Evelyn's will. The question stopped me cold. The truth was that I had never seen it. After Evelyn passed, my mother Celeste had handled everything connected to the estate. Every time I brought it up, Celeste said the same things, that the process was simple, that everything was settled, that dragging it out would only cause more pain. I had believed her because I wanted to believe that at least one corner of my family was honest. That night, sitting alone with my receipts and Evelyn's voice still ringing in my ears, I realized I had made a very expensive mistake. The next morning, I called Celeste and asked for a copy of Evelyn's will. I kept my voice even. I kept my words simple. I was not accusing anyone of anything. I just wanted to see the document that described what Evelyn had wanted. Celeste went cold the moment I asked. Not sad, not confused, cold, like a door closing. She told me I was being greedy, that I had always found ways to make other people's grief about myself, that this kind of behavior was exactly why the family had never been able to fully trust me. Before I could respond, Bianca got on the phone. I do not know if she had been listening the whole time or if Celeste called her in, and she told me the house was never mine, that I needed to stop clinging to things I had no claim to, and that Evelyn would have been embarrassed to see me acting this way. I almost let those words sink into me the way they always had. I almost apologized. Then a message came through on my phone. It was from Doreen, who lived across the street from Evelyn's house. Doreen had sent me a photo. I opened it and saw the lawn sign that had been planted in front of Evelyn's home while Celeste and I were still on the phone. The sign said, "Sale prep in progress." I stared at it for a long time. Then I called Nina back. Doreen had lived across from Evelyn for nearly 20 years. She knew the rhythms of that street the way most people know their own homes, and when she reached out to me, she was not trying to cause trouble. She was trying to tell me what she had seen because she thought I deserved to know. She told me that just 2 days after Evelyn's funeral, she watched Celeste and Bianca moving things out of the house. Not old clothes. Not kitchenware. Boxes, file boxes, jewelry cases, personal papers packed into the back of Bianca's car while the neighborhood was still quiet with grief. Doreen said it had made her uncomfortable, but she had told herself it was not her business. Then she told me the part that turned my stomach completely over. While carrying boxes to the car, Bianca had said, loudly enough for Doreen to hear through an open window, "Once Teresa finds out, it'll be too late anyway." I wrote that sentence down. I wrote it word for word on a piece of paper and put it next to my receipts. I asked Doreen if anyone else had been there that day. She said yes. A man in a suit, someone she did not recognize. Not the family attorney Celeste had named to me as the person handling Evelyn's estate. Someone else. Someone quiet. Someone no one had mentioned. Nina went silent when I told her that part. With Nina guiding me, I started making calls. I reached out to the office of the attorney Celeste had told me was handling Evelyn's final property matters. The person on the other end of the phone looked through their records and confirmed what I was beginning to fear. They had not handled any final transfer connected to Evelyn's property. None. Zero. The name Celeste had given me, the firm she had referenced every time I asked questions, had nothing to do with what was happening to Evelyn's house. That meant someone else had been brought in after Evelyn died, quietly, without any announcement, without anyone telling me. Nina stopped sounding curious and started sounding the way she sounded when things were serious. She told me that when family members rush a property sale, hide documents, and work to push one heir out of the picture, it almost always means there was something buried under the surface that someone did not want found. Then, while I was sitting at my kitchen table staring at a blank wall, my phone buzzed. The name on the screen was Adrian, the real estate agent who had been standing on Evelyn's lawn with his clipboard when Bianca told me to leave. He was asking if we could meet. I met Adrian at a coffee shop 2 days later. He sat across from me with his hands folded on the table like someone preparing to say something that made him uncomfortable. He told me that when he looked more carefully at the estate file connected to Evelyn's property, my name, Teresa Hale, did not appear as some distant relative or minor note. It appeared as a required signatory, tied to a probate condition that had to be satisfied before any legal sale could move forward. He said he had asked Bianca about it, expecting a simple explanation. Instead, Bianca became aggressive. She told him I was unstable, that I was estranged from the family, that I had a history of making false claims and trying to extract money from people who were grieving. Sitting in that coffee shop, hearing my sister's lies repeated back to me by a stranger, I felt something turn very hard inside of me. Adrian slid his business card across the table and told me plainly that I needed a probate litigator and I needed one quickly. Then he added one more thing, almost like he did not want to say it but felt I had to know. There was already a cash buyer in place. The deal was scheduled to move fast. And if I did not act soon, the window to stop it might close before I fully understood what I was walking into. That evening, I drove to Bianca's apartment. I knocked instead of calling because I did not want her to have time to prepare a performance. When she opened the door, she did not look guilty. She looked annoyed, like I was an interruption in a day that was otherwise going exactly how she wanted. I told her calmly that I knew about the required signature. I told her I knew the sale could not legally move forward without me. I asked her to explain what was happening. Bianca did not panic. She crossed her arms and told me I had always been confused about the difference between helping out and actually mattering. She said the money from Evelyn's house was going to finally give her the life she deserved. She used that word, deserved. Not needed, not earned, deserved, like the house and everything it represented had always been meant for her and I had simply been standing in the way. I drove home replaying the way she said it. Bianca did not sound nostalgic about Evelyn. She did not sound sad that the house was being sold or that a piece of our grandmother's life was being converted into a transaction. She sounded like someone who had already spent the money in her mind, already furnished the future it would buy. Desperate people, I thought. Desperate people make choices that careful people would never make. And Bianca sounded very, very desperate. When I told Nina what Bianca had said, even Nina went quiet for a moment. Then she told me to stop talking to Bianca directly. She said every conversation I had with Bianca without a record was a conversation Bianca could reframe however she wanted. Nina filed the necessary requests and within a week, the first estate summary came through. It was not what Celeste had described, not simple, not clean, not settled. Evelyn's house had not been transferred to Bianca at all. It was still sitting inside a conditional probate structure. And attached to that structure, buried in the file, was a second sealed document, a sealed instruction that Celeste had never once mentioned to me. Not once. I stared at the estate summary for a long time. I read it again. Then I sent a photo of the relevant section to Nina and waited. When I looked up from my phone, I noticed I had a banking alert. Someone had attempted to access an old reimbursement account, an account that Evelyn had used to send me payments over the years for the work I had been doing on her property. An account I had almost forgotten existed. And someone had just tried to get into it. I sat very still for a moment, thinking about who knew that account existed, who would have had the account details, and what they were hoping to find, or erase, before I had a chance to look at it myself. The bank records arrived, and they said everything that Celeste had always pretended was nothing. Every single transfer from Evelyn into that account had a memo attached to it. Property preservation. Tax support. House maintenance. And once, in a line that made my throat close, the note simply said, "For your share of the burden." Celeste had spent years telling anyone who would listen that those payments were Evelyn helping me out, the way a grandmother helps a granddaughter with small expenses here and there. The records showed something completely different. Every note was specific, intentional, and connected directly to the house. Evelyn had not been giving me extra money out of affection. She had been paying me back, carefully, consistently, in a way that proved she understood exactly who had been carrying the weight. I printed every page. I put them in the folder with my repair receipts and sat there looking at 6 years of work laid out in black and white. Then my phone rang. It was my Aunt Marla, Celeste's younger sister, a woman who had never liked drama and had always stayed carefully in the background during family disagreements. When Marla said she needed to tell me something, I knew she meant it. Marla was not the kind of person who called unless she had been carrying something for too long. Marla's voice was tight when she spoke, like someone trying to say a hard thing before they changed their mind. She told me that months before Evelyn died, she had overheard Celeste arguing with Evelyn in the kitchen. Not a small argument. A real one, the kind with lowered voices and sharp words and silences that lasted too long. Celeste had been pressuring Evelyn to fix things properly before it was too late. At the time, Marla had told herself it was just Celeste being Celeste, anxious, controlling, always managing something. After the funeral, when Celeste began shutting down every question I asked, Marla saw those words in a different light. Then Marla told me the second thing, the part she had been sitting on since before Evelyn was even gone. Bianca had been referring to Evelyn's house as my future place for months. Long before Evelyn passed, long before there was any legal process, long before anyone had a right to talk about that house like it was theirs. Bianca had been treating the sale as a certainty while Evelyn was still alive. Before Marla ended the call, she dropped her voice to almost a whisper and said, "Teresa, find the notary." I asked her what she meant. Marla said, Evelyn did not go through the regular process alone. She made sure of that. Find the notary. Then she hung up. It took Nina almost 2 weeks to track down the notary. His name was Harold, and he was a quiet, careful man who did not enjoy being pulled into family conflicts. But when Nina reached him and explained what was happening, Harold agreed to speak. He remembered Evelyn immediately. He said she had been very clear about one thing from the moment they met. She did not want Bianca or Celeste in the room. She came alone. She asked Harold to come to her home on a day she knew they would be elsewhere, and she was, in Harold's words, completely clear-minded, deliberate, and calm. Harold said Evelyn knew exactly what she was doing and exactly why. He could not share every detail right away, there were procedures, but he confirmed one thing immediately, and it hit me harder than almost anything else I had heard in weeks. Evelyn had specifically instructed that no one was to pressure Teresa Hale out of the house after her death. She had said my name. She had said it out loud, to a neutral party, in a documented setting. Harold also confirmed that Evelyn had left a handwritten letter to be released if anyone tried to force, conceal, or rush a sale involving the property. The letter existed. It was being held properly. And Nina now knew exactly how to get it released. Nina got the letter released on a Thursday morning. She sent it to me as a scanned document, and I read it alone at my kitchen table with the door closed and my phone turned face down. Evelyn wrote in her careful, looping handwriting that I, Teresa Hale, had carried the house when no one else was willing to. She wrote that Bianca had always loved the idea of ownership more than the reality of responsibility. She wrote that she feared, her exact word was feared, greed dressed as entitlement rising up after she was gone. And she made it clear, without any room for confusion, that the house could not be sold without my written consent. She also wrote that if I was pressured, pushed out, or deceived in any way, I was to receive first priority in both protection and reimbursement from the estate. I read it 3 times. Then I sat with my hands flat on the table and breathed. Less than 1 hour later, my phone rang. It was Celeste. Her voice was soft, shaky, careful in the way it always got when she was trying to manage a situation she had lost control of. She said the family was falling apart and she did not want that. She said she hoped we could talk. For 1 second, just one, I thought she might finally say she was sorry. Then Celeste asked me not to tear the family apart. Not to apologize. Just not to tear anything apart. Celeste arranged what she called a peace meeting at the home of my Uncle Victor. She framed it as a family conversation, a chance for everyone to find fairness together, to move forward with love and reason instead of lawyers and anger. I almost did not go. Nina told me I did not have to. But something in me needed to be in that room, needed to look at the people who had tried to erase me and let them know, while standing on my own 2 feet, that I was still there. I walked into Victor's living room and knew immediately it was a trap. Bianca was already seated, composed, wearing the polished expression she always put on when she wanted to seem innocent while being cruel. Celeste sat beside her with folded hands, the picture of a grieving, reasonable mother. Victor looked uncomfortable in his own chair. Marla sat near the window and would not meet my eyes at first. Celeste opened by saying the family needed calm, not conflict, and that everyone deserved to feel heard. Then Bianca began her speech. She said I had always been jealous of her, that ever since we were children, I had found ways to undermine her and position myself as the good one. She said I was using Evelyn's emotions, weaponizing an old woman's fondness for me, to punish Bianca for finally having something that belonged to her. I let her keep talking. I waited. Because Bianca always went too far when she felt safe. Bianca made the mistake near the end of her speech. She had been building toward it the whole time without realizing it. Talking faster, getting louder, leaning into her performance until the emotion she was performing started to feel real to her. Then she said it. She admitted, out loud, in Victor's living room, in front of everyone, that she had already promised portions of the sale money to cover personal debts. She said she had used the expected payment to secure a lease on a luxury apartment. She said she had made commitments based on what that sale would bring her. The room shifted the second she said it. Not because people were shocked by the amount. Because they finally understood what the sale had always been about. Victor leaned forward in his chair and asked what debt she was talking about. Bianca got defensive too fast, the way people do when a question is closer to the truth than they expected. Her phone rang once. Then again. She stared at the screen, and my cousin, who had been quiet the whole meeting, asked her directly who was calling. One by one, things began coming out. The credit card balances. The boutique that Bianca had been presenting to the family as a success while privately watching it fail. The designer purchases, the personal loans, the image she had been building on borrowed time. Bianca had not loved Evelyn's house. She had needed it. Once Bianca's story started falling apart, other voices in that room found the courage to speak. Marla, who had always stayed carefully quiet, looked at Celeste and asked her plainly why she had moved files out of Evelyn's house 2 days after the funeral. Victor asked who had authorized the removal of Evelyn's personal papers. My cousin asked, quietly but clearly, who had stayed overnight with Evelyn after her fall the previous winter. Everyone in that room already knew the answer to that question. It was me. It had always been me. Marla reminded the room who had taken Evelyn to her medical appointments. Victor asked who paid for the furnace repair during the coldest month of the year. Every question pointed in the same direction. Bianca tried to rewrite the story in real time, claiming she had sacrificed more than anyone knew, that she had been doing things behind the scenes that no one had ever acknowledged. But nobody backed her. Not one person in that room offered her the agreement she was looking for. Celeste tried to redirect the conversation toward resolution, but the room had already moved past her. Bianca stood up, said something sharp and ugly, and walked out. The door closed behind her. For a few seconds, everyone sat in the silence she left behind. Then Nina called. Her voice was tight. She told me to sit down. Someone had filed an affidavit using my name. Nina described what she was looking at, and I felt the temperature drop in the room around me. The affidavit was a formal legal document. It claimed that Teresa Hale had been properly notified about the estate, had reviewed the relevant documents, and had voluntarily declined any financial interest in Evelyn's property. It claimed I had chosen, of my own free will, to remove myself from the process. The signature at the bottom was close enough to mine to fool someone who had never studied it. But it was wrong, the angle of the T, the loop in the H, small things that someone who had watched me sign documents for 30 years should have known better than to fake. I drove to Celeste's house that evening and showed her a printed copy. She looked at it with wide eyes and pressed her hand to her chest and said she had no idea where it came from, that someone must have made a terrible mistake. It was a practiced response, the kind you give when you have already rehearsed it. Bianca, when I confronted her separately, said almost nothing. She looked at the document, looked at me, and then looked away. That silence told me everything I needed. Because Bianca always had an answer. Bianca always had a story ready, a defense waiting, a performance prepared. When she said nothing, it was because there was nothing left to say. Nina asked for everything, every email, every message, every document connected to the sale process. Adrian, to his credit, cooperated fully. He had already been uncomfortable from the beginning, and once he understood the full shape of what had happened, he handed over the entire communication trail without hesitation. The emails between Celeste and Adrian's office told the story clearly. Celeste had coordinated the timeline, pushed urgency, and on multiple occasions referred to me as unstable, bitter, and likely to interfere if given any warning. She had framed the rush as necessary, the secrecy as practical, and my absence from the process as something I had brought on myself. When I read those emails, printed and stacked in a neat pile on Nina's desk, I did not cry. I had thought I might. Instead, I felt something settle inside me, a quiet, heavy clarity. I confronted Celeste with the emails. I sat across from her at her own kitchen table and placed them between us and did not say a single dramatic word. I just waited. Celeste stopped pretending after a moment. She looked at me and said the house would have been wasted on me. She said Bianca at least looked like someone success belonged to. She said I had always been useful, but never impressive. Those words, from my own mother, should have destroyed me. They didn't. Because I had spent years believing some version of them without anyone saying them out loud, and hearing them spoken finally made them smaller, not larger. After that conversation with Celeste, something changed in me permanently. I stopped trying to make her understand what she had done. I stopped explaining myself to Bianca. I stopped reaching for resolution in a family that had been treating my silence as consent for years. I sent everything through Nina. I blocked the cousins who called to pressure me toward forgiveness. I gave Adrian formal legal notice that no listing, no showing, and no further sale preparation could proceed without full legal compliance. Bianca sent me a voice message the day after. She was furious, her voice sharp and fast and full of the kind of anger that comes from losing something you were counting on. She called me selfish. She called me cruel. She said I was destroying the family over money I did not even need. I listened to the whole message. Then I saved it. Because buried inside all that anger, Bianca said one sentence that mattered more than the rest. She said, "You knew I needed this, and you still wouldn't sign." Not that she deserved it. Not that it was hers. Not that Evelyn had wanted her to have it. She said she needed it. That one word, needed, was the most honest thing Bianca had said throughout the entire ordeal. It cracked open the whole performance and showed what had always been underneath. The buyer's attorney reached out to Nina 2 days before the court hearing. His name was Julian, and he was professional, precise, and visibly unhappy about the situation he had been placed in. Julian told Nina that his client had been told Teresa Hale was a distant, unstable relative trying to insert herself into an estate she had no real connection to. His client had been told the process was clean, the paperwork was in order, and the sale was straightforward. Julian had taken those assurances at face value because they had come from people who seemed to know what they were talking about. Now Julian was staring at Evelyn's handwritten letter, Harold's notarized statements, 6 years of reimbursement bank records, and an affidavit that appeared to carry a forged signature. Julian was not sympathetic to Bianca or Celeste. He was furious. His client had nearly been pulled into what looked, from the outside, like a fraudulent property transfer. He wanted out, and he wanted the record to show that his client had acted in good faith throughout. For the first time in all of this, someone outside my family, someone with no emotional loyalty to anyone in that house, had looked at the facts without a filter and seen exactly what they were. The court hearing was scheduled quickly once everything was filed. I sat beside Nina at the table and kept my hand still and my face calm. Across from us, Bianca and Celeste had their own representation, but I could see even before proceedings began that their case had structural problems that no attorney could fully paper over. The judge opened with the probate file and the conditional structure around Evelyn's estate. Celeste testified first. She tried confusion initially, talking around dates, mixing up timelines, presenting herself as an overwhelmed grieving daughter who had only been trying to help. When that did not land, she moved to selective memory. When that did not land either, she cried. The judge remained unmoved. Bianca testified next and made things considerably worse. She first claimed the house had been entirely Evelyn's to give to her, that there had been no shared interest, no conditions, no requirement for additional consent. Then, under follow-up questions, she admitted that she had known my signature was required and had simply considered it a formality, a step that should happen automatically because I had no real reason to object. The judge's expression shifted to the word formality. It shifted again when Nina placed the folder of repair receipts, bank records, and Evelyn's handwritten letter on the table. Harold testified last, and the room changed when he did. He was composed, exact, and completely credible. He described Evelyn arriving alone, asking for privacy, and being entirely clear in both her intentions and her reasoning. He confirmed that she had named me specifically, Teresa Hale, not as a sentimental afterthought but as someone with a documented interest in the property and a documented right to protection after her death. He confirmed the existence of the sealed letter and the conditions under which it was to be released. He confirmed that Evelyn had told him directly that she was afraid of what might happen to me once she was gone. Nina then presented the affidavit with the forged signature. She presented Adrian's email trail. She presented the bank records with Evelyn's handwritten memos. She presented Doreen's written statement. She presented the testimony regarding the unknown man in the suit who had been present when Bianca and Celeste cleared the house. The judge reviewed everything without rushing. Then she spoke. She recognized me as a protected co-interest holder under Evelyn's estate instructions. She acknowledged my reimbursement priority. She affirmed that no sale could proceed without my written consent and that any prior attempts to move the sale forward without that consent had not been conducted in good faith. Bianca cried in the hallway afterward. I saw her from a distance, slumped against the wall with her attorney speaking quietly beside her. I did not feel the satisfaction I thought I might feel. What I felt was something quieter and harder to name, the specific exhaustion of someone who has been fighting to be seen for a very long time and has finally, formally, been seen. Bianca looked up once and found my eyes across the hallway. She did not look sorry. She looked stunned, the way people look when the world refuses to organize itself around their expectations. Celeste was somewhere behind me. I did not turn around. When people asked me in the days that followed how I felt, I found it difficult to explain. They expected triumph. They expected relief. What I actually felt was something more like grief, not for the house, not even for what Bianca and Celeste had tried to do, but for the version of my family I had wanted to believe in for so long. Celeste had whispered in the hallway, just before I walked away, that families survive by letting things go. I had stopped and looked at her for a moment. What she called letting things go had always required one specific person to be the one who let go. It had always required my silence. And I had given it to them for too many years already. In the end, Evelyn's house was not taken from me. It moved through the legal process properly, with my knowledge, my consent, and my name signed on documents that actually existed. My reimbursement was formally recognized. The estate was corrected. Bianca received far less than the future she had built in her imagination, and most of what she had been counting on disappeared into the consequences of her own choices. Celeste was left to face a family she had manipulated with a mask that no longer fit her face the way it once had. Marla, Victor, Doreen, Harold, Adrian, and Julian had all, in their different ways and for their different reasons, helped the truth come forward. When it was finally over, Adrian placed the final documents in front of me. He did not rush. He did not treat it like a transaction. He looked at me with something that felt like honest respect and said, "Whenever you're ready, Teresa." I signed my name, Teresa Hale, slowly and clearly. Not because I had beaten anyone. Not to prove a point to Bianca or to Celeste or to anyone else who had tried to make me feel like my name on a document was just a formality. I signed because Evelyn's voice had not been buried. Because the truth, once it had enough hands holding it, could not be pushed back underground. Because what they had called peace had always just been my silence, and I was done being silent. Bianca had called my name a nuisance. Celeste had called me useful but unimpressive. Evelyn had called me the one who kept the house alive. I knew whose words I would carry. And I walked out of that room holding my papers and my grandmother's belief in me, finally standing in a place no one else had the power to sign me out of.